As you said, there's a freedom in it. When I was forgiven and I experienced that forgiveness, it freed me up inside to soar. You know, it freed me up inside to go higher and to go deeper with the Lord. But when we're holding unforgiveness, we're blocking.
What leads a woman to commit acts so horrific that the law sees no option but capital punishment? From a mother who wiped out her entire family to a woman who led one of the most feared biker gangs in history. These are the chilling stories of the most notorious women ever sentenced to face the ultimate punishment. She was once married to Dan Heady, a man with a habit of living off illegal money. Over time, Bonnie became familiar, if not comfortable, with that way of life. But things took a darker turn when she got involved with Carl Austin Hall, a man with a troubled past and a taste for quick, illegal cash. Together, they became a dangerous duo. And on September 28, 1953, Bonnie Heady walked calmly into the Notre Dame de Sion, a Catholic school in Kansas City, Missouri. She claimed to be the aunt of 6-year-old Bobby Greenlease, the son of a wealthy car dealer. The school staff had no reason to question her. Trusting her story, they handed Bobby over without hesitation. From there, Bonnie and Carl took the boy across state lines into Kansas. They contacted the Greenlease family with a ransom demand of $600,000, the largest in U.S. history at the time. But what the family didn't know was that Bobby was already gone. Soon after they took him, the couple ended Bobby's life and buried him in the backyard of Bonnie's home in St. Joseph, Missouri. Their motive? Purely financial. Hall and Heady were desperate for cash and saw it as their ticket out, completely ignoring the human cost of what they were doing. Authorities caught them quickly, and the legal process moved just as fast. Both pleaded guilty. The judge, visibly shaken by the details, called it one of the most cold-blooded and deliberate incidents he had ever seen. The courtroom was tense as the verdict was read. And when Heady was sentenced, she reportedly sneered, "I'd rather be gone than poor." The punishment, the harshest the law allowed. In a rare moment in American history, both Heady and Hall were sentenced to be carried out together. Just after midnight on December 18, 1953, they were led into the execution chamber at the Missouri State Penitentiary, side by side. As they sat waiting, Heady turned to Hall and asked softly, "Are you doing all right, honey?" Hall replied, "Yes, Mama." Their final words captured the eerie, twisted bond they shared, even in their final moments. The shocking details of the next case, it will haunt you forever. Suzanne Margaret Basso was born in Schenectady, New York in 1954. She grew up in a difficult and unstable home. She was one of 8 children, and her early years were filled with hardship. Her mother, Florence Garrow, was the sister of Robert Garrow, who became widely known for a series of violent acts. Suzanne's childhood was deeply troubled, with reports of harsh treatment, including an incident where her mother forced her to eat an entire pack of cigarettes as punishment. In the early 1970s, Suzanne married a Marine named James Peak, taking the name Sue Peak. They had 2 children, a daughter in 1973 and a son in 1974, but their marriage was filled with problems. In 1982, James was convicted of harassing their daughter, which further fractured the family. By the early 1990s, Suzanne and her children moved to Houston, Texas, where they began using the surname O'Malley and created a false backstory of being Irish American. During this time, Suzanne worked off and on as a security guard. In 1993, she became involved with Carmine Basso, a businessman from New Jersey. Though she never legally divorced James Peak, she changed her last name to Basso and referred to Carmine as her husband until he passed away in 1997. Louis Charles Buddy Musso was a 59-year-old man with cognitive challenges who lived in Cliffside Park, New Jersey. He had lost his wife in 1980 and lived in an assisted living facility while working as a grocery bagger. In 1997, he met Suzanne Basso at a church event, and their relationship quickly grew. Wanting companionship, Buddy moved to Houston on June 14, 1998, to be with Suzanne. Less than 3 weeks after his arrival, Buddy found himself trapped in a nightmare. Suzanne, along with her son, James O'Malley, Bernice Aarons Miller, her children Craig and Hope Aarons, and Hope's fiancé Terrence Singleton subjected Buddy to constant mistreatment. They made him do chores and physically harmed him over time. The cruelty escalated when they took him to Miller's apartment, where they used belts and baseball bats against him, burned him with cigarettes, scrubbed his skin with a wire brush, and even submerged him in a bathtub filled with cleaning chemicals. After dressing him in fresh clothes, they abandoned him in Galena Park, Texas. A jogger later found him, and an examination confirmed he had suffered extensive injuries. The motivation behind this horrific act was money. Suzanne planned to take control of Buddy's life insurance and financial benefits. By deceiving him and removing him from the picture, she hoped to gain financially. In August 1999, Suzanne Basso was found guilty of carrying out this terrible act. On October 28, 1999, she was sentenced to the most severe punishment allowed by law. On February 5, 2014, at the Huntsville unit, Suzanne faced the consequences of her actions. She declined a special last meal and had the same food as other inmates. Her final words were never recorded. Now, let's shift focus to a yet so shocking case where desperate choices led to a fatal outcome. Velma Barfield, born Margie Velma Bullard in 1932 in South Carolina, grew up in a strict Pentecostal household as one of 9 children. Life was disciplined, faith-driven, and full of rules. At 17, she left school, married Thomas Burke, and started a family. For a while, things seemed stable, but after a surgery left Velma with chronic pain, everything began to change. She developed a growing dependence on medication, and her personality started to shift. But before we move on to the details, don't forget to like and subscribe for more chilling stories. In 1969, Thomas Burke passed in a house fire under suspicious circumstances. Just a year later, Velma married Jennings Barfield, but he too died suddenly, this time from what appeared to be heart failure. Then, the pattern continued. Between 1974 and 1978, more people around Velma fell gravely ill, including her own mother, Lillian Bullard, and later her boyfriend Stuart Taylor. At first, their passing seemed unrelated, tragic but natural. But when investigators finally connected the dots, they discovered a chilling truth. Each victim had been poisoned. In 1978, Velma was arrested, and the quiet Southern woman with a soft voice became the center of one of the most disturbing cases in North Carolina's history. During her trial, Velma admitted to what had happened, explaining that her struggles with medication dependence and financial worries played a role in her actions. After an hour of deliberation, the jury found her responsible, and she received capital punishment. On November 2, 1984, her sentence was carried out. For her final meal, she chose cheese doodles and a Kit Kat bar. Before everything came to an end, she expressed regret, saying,
"I want to say that I'm sorry for all the hurt that I have caused."
Velma Barfield's case was historically significant, as she was the first woman in the U.S. to receive this outcome after legal policies changed in 1976. She was also the first woman to undergo this process using modern medical procedures. But what happens when you're surrounded by the wrong friends, the kind that don't just influence you, but drag you into something you can't escape? Karla Faye Tucker was born in 1959 in Houston, Texas. Her early years were difficult. Her parents had a rocky relationship that led to multiple divorces, making home life unstable. By the age of 12, Karla had started using illegal substances, and by 14, she was working in an environment where she was exposed to dangerous and unhealthy situations alongside her mother. Growing up surrounded by substance use and risky behavior made her teenage years even more difficult. As a teenager, Karla became involved with Houston's underground scene, forming friendships with bikers and was using heavily. During this time, she met Daniel Garrett, a fellow substance user and a member of the Bandito motorcycle group. Their relationship was built around substance use, which led them to make increasingly reckless decisions. The night of June 13, 1983, was a turning point. Under the influence of multiple substances, Karla and Daniel decided to break into the apartment of Jerry Lynn Dean, a man Karla knew and reportedly had personal issues with. Their goal was to steal from him, but the situation quickly became out of control. When they entered the apartment, they encountered Jerry and his companion, Deborah Thornton. A chaotic struggle followed, and Karla and Daniel used a pickaxe and a hammer to end both their lives. What leads someone to take such extreme actions? In Karla's case, a combination of substance-induced judgment, a history of exposure to poor conditions, and personal grievances all played a role in what happened that night. In the days that followed, Karla reportedly spoke casually about what had happened with friends, showing little to no regret. But as time went on, the reality of her actions began to sink in. Eventually, both she and Daniel were arrested, and the legal process moved quickly. In 1984, Karla was found guilty and sentenced to the most severe punishment. While held at the Mountain View unit in Gatesville, Texas, Karla underwent a dramatic transformation. She embraced Christianity, openly expressed deep remorse, and became known as a model inmate. Her change drew national attention, with religious leaders and human rights groups rallying for her to be given a second chance. But despite the growing support and public appeals, her sentence remained unchanged. On February 3, 1998, Karla's sentence was carried out. For her final meal, she asked for a banana, a peach, and a garden salad with ranch dressing. Her last words reflected her faith and her feelings of sorrow for what had happened.
Yes, sir, I would like to say to all of you, the Thornton family and Jerry Dean's family, that I am so sorry. I hope God will give you peace with this. She continued, expressing love for her family and appreciation for her spiritual journey, ending with, I will see you all when you get there. I will wait for you.
Her case was historically significant, as she was the first woman in Texas to receive such a sentence since 1863. The next case brings us to a woman whose actions resulted in the tragic loss of her husband, son, and a boyfriend. Judy Buenoano was born on April 4, 1943 in Quanah, Texas, and faced hardship from the very beginning. At just 4 years old, she lost her mother and was sent, along with her younger brother, to live with their grandparents. Later, the siblings moved to Roswell, New Mexico to live with their father and his new wife, but things only got worse. At just 14, the pressure snapped. She threw hot grease at them in a fit of rage. After a brief stay in juvenile detention, she opted to attend reform school. She graduated in 1960 and went on to become a nursing assistant. In 1963, Judy married James Goodyear, a U.S. Air Force sergeant. Together, they had a son named James and later adopted Michael. Life seemed stable until 1971, when James returned from a tour in Vietnam. Soon after coming home, he suddenly fell seriously ill and passed away. Doctors believed it was natural causes, and no one asked too many questions. After this, Judy relocated to Florida and opened a beauty salon. A year later, in 1972, she began a new relationship with Bobby Joe Morris in Colorado. But history repeated itself. In 1978, Morris also became mysteriously ill and passed away. That same year, Judy made a curious move. She legally changed her last name to Buenoano. Judy had a pattern of using toxic substances to slowly weaken those close to her, making their illnesses seem natural. This approach made it difficult for anyone to suspect wrongdoing. One of the most tragic incidents involved her son, Michael. After a long period of unexplained sickness, he developed severe mobility issues. In 1980, Judy took him on a canoe trip where the boat unexpectedly capsized, and Michael, unable to swim due to his condition, drowned. In 1983, suspicion grew when her fiancé, John Gentry, survived a sudden explosion in his car in Pensacola, Florida. As he recovered, inconsistencies in Judy's background and actions led authorities to investigate. They discovered that the vitamins she had been giving him contained harmful substances. Further investigations, including exhumations of her past partners and son, revealed that they had been exposed to similar toxic chemicals. Her motive? Financial gain through life insurance policies as a primary motive. This led to Judy's arrest on January 11, 1984. Judy faced multiple legal proceedings. In 1984, she was convicted for her actions against John Gentry and for what happened to her son, Michael. She received a 12-year sentence in Gentry's case and a life sentence for Michael. In 1985, she was also found responsible for her husband's passing, which resulted in capital punishment. On March 30th, 1998, Judy Buenoano faced her final legal consequence in Florida State Prison. Her last meal included steamed broccoli, asparagus, strawberries, tomato wedges with lemon, and hot tea. When asked if she had any final words, she simply responded,
"No, sir."
What are your thoughts on this case? Let me know in the comments. Betty Lou Beets was born in 1937 in Roxborough, North Carolina, had a difficult early life. Her father was a heavy drinker, and her mother faced serious mental health challenges. When Betty Lou was 12, her mother was placed in an institution, leaving her to take care of her younger siblings. A childhood illness caused her to lose her hearing, and she later spoke about experiencing mistreatment at the hands of her father. Looking for a way out, Betty Lou married Robert Franklin Branson at 15. This was the first of several marriages, many of which were reportedly troubled. She was married 6 times, including twice to the same man, Billy York Lane. Her relationships were often marked by turmoil. In 1970, she used a firearm against Lane during an argument, but she was cleared after he admitted to threatening her. In 1978, she attempted to run over her third husband, Ronnie C. Throwcold, with her car. Things took a more serious turn with her fifth husband, Jimmy Don Beets. On August 6, 1983, Betty Lou reported him missing from their home near Cedar Creek Lake, Texas. She said he had gone fishing and never came back. Authorities found his boat drifting in the lake with his heart medication inside, suggesting he may have had an accident and fallen into the water. Despite an extensive search, he was not found. 2 years later, authorities revisited the case after receiving a tip from a confidential source. This led them to search Betty Lou's property. Beneath a covered wishing well in her yard, they found Jimmy Don's remains. Further investigation in a garage uncovered another set of remains, those of her fourth husband, Doyle Wayne Barker. Both men had been harmed with a .38 caliber firearm. This discovery raised serious questions. How had this gone unnoticed for so long? The remote location of her home and the initial belief that her husbands had simply disappeared contributed to the delay in uncovering the truth. In October 1985, Betty Lou went to trial for what happened to Jimmy Don Beets. The prosecution highlighted her history of previous incidents, including testimony from surviving ex-husbands. The defense argued that she had endured years of mistreatment and had mental health struggles. However, the jury found her responsible, and she was given the most severe legal penalty. During the 15 years she spent in confinement, her legal team appealed the decision, arguing that her past experiences and mental health should have been given more weight in the sentencing. Supporters believed these factors had been overlooked, but the courts upheld the ruling. On February 24, 2000, at the Huntsville unit in Texas, Betty Lou's sentence was carried out. She chose not to have a final meal and did not make a final statement. Afterward, her remains were cremated and her ashes were scattered over her mother's grave. Wanda Jean Allen was born in 1959 and was the second of 8 children. Her father left the family after the birth of the youngest sibling, leaving her mother, who battled heavy drinking, to raise the children in public housing with very little financial support. The family faced extreme poverty, and Wanda Jean's early life was filled with instability. At the age of 12, she suffered a serious head injury when she was hit by a truck, causing her to lose consciousness. A few years later, she was wounded in the left temple with a sharp object. These injuries had lasting effects, and later assessments showed she had an IQ of 69, along with difficulties in comprehension and logical thinking. Experts found that the left side of her brain did not function properly, making it hard for her to process situations under stress. By the age of 17, she had dropped out of high school, limiting her future opportunities. In 1981, Wanda Jean lived with Deidre Pettis, a childhood friend who had become her partner. On June 29th of that year, a heated argument between them escalated, ending with Wanda Jean using a firearm against Deidre. At first, she claimed it was an accident and that she was responding to a threat from Deidre's boyfriend. However, forensic evidence showed that Deidre had been harmed before being struck at close range. Wanda Jean accepted a plea deal and was sentenced to 4 years behind bars for this incident, though she served only 2 years. After her release, she entered a relationship with Gloria Jean Leathers, whom she had met while incarcerated. Their relationship was troubled and often involved conflicts. On December 2, 1988, they had a public dispute at a grocery store, which led to police involvement. An officer escorted them home so Gloria could collect her belongings. Wanda Jean begged her to stay and work things out, but Gloria refused. As she left, she hit Wanda Jean in the face with a garden rake and then went with her mother to the police station to file a complaint. Wanda Jean followed them to the station, still hoping to resolve things. In the parking lot, she saw Gloria still holding the rake. In response, Wanda Jean retrieved a .38 caliber handgun from her car and used it against Gloria. Gloria was taken to the hospital, but she did not survive her injuries and passed away 3 days later, on December 5, 1988. Because of her previous conviction, prosecutors sought the most severe penalty. During the trial, Wanda Jean's legal team argued that her brain injuries and cognitive difficulties affected her ability to make rational decisions. Despite these claims, the jury found her responsible for the incident, and in April 1989, she received the harshest possible sentence. As her final day approached, Wanda Jean was given the opportunity to request a last meal. She chose a simple bag of potato chips, a stark contrast to the elaborate meals others in her position often requested. On January 11, 2001, at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary in McAllister, she was led into the chamber. As she lay strapped to the gurney, she spoke her final words, "Father, forgive them. They know not what they do." She then stuck out her tongue and smiled at her lawyer, David Presson, who had become a close friend over the years. Presson later described her as dancing on the mattress while they tried to take her life. Lynda Cheryl Lyon Block was born in 1948 in Orlando, Florida, to Francis Stephen Frank Lyon and Beryline Elizabeth Owen. Her childhood was difficult. At just 10 years old, she lost her father due to heart failure. This loss strained her relationship with her mother, whom she later described as both physically and emotionally harsh. As an adult, Block was known for her involvement in community activities. While living in Key West, Florida, she served as secretary of the Humane Society and worked as an investigator for cases involving mistreatment of animals. She also led the Friends of the Library in Key West for 2 years and worked as the publicity director for a mayoral candidate. In addition to these roles, Block published Liberatis, a political magazine reflecting her strong libertarian beliefs. Block's personal life was complicated. She married Carl Block, an 80-year-old military veteran who had suffered the loss of his son in a car accident. Their marriage ended in divorce in December 1991. After that, she became involved with George Sibley Jr., and their relationship was turbulent. In August 1992, Block and Sibley confronted her ex-husband Carl at his apartment. They tied him up and covered his mouth, demanding that he stop trying to reclaim their shared residence. During this encounter, Block caused him harm before leaving him restrained. Neighbors found him later, and as a result, Block and Sibley were charged with causing injury to an elderly person. They both pleaded no contest but failed to show up for their sentencing, putting them on the run. Things escalated on October 4, 1993, in Opelika, Alabama. While evading authorities, Block and Sibley stopped at a shopping center. Sibley went inside a store while Block remained in their car with a child. Opelika Police Sergeant Roger Motley Jr. noticed Block and, concerned about the child's well-being, approached the vehicle. A confrontation followed, leading to an exchange of gunfire. Both Block and Sibley fired at Motley, who sustained severe injuries. Block was also wounded during the encounter. What led Block and Sibley to this point? Their deep distrust of governmental authority played a major role. Their strong libertarian beliefs led them to resist law enforcement, believing they had the right to defend themselves against what they saw as government overreach. After their arrests, both were charged with an offense that carried the most serious penalty. Block's trial began in 1994. She chose to represent herself. arguing that her actions were in self-defense and that she was protecting her family from what she believed were unlawful threats. The jury disagreed, and in December 1994, she was sentenced to the most severe consequence the law allows. While on a high-security unit at the Julia Tutwiler Prison for Women in Wetumpka, Alabama, Block remained firm in her beliefs. She continued to express her views and showed no sign of changing her stance. By 1999, all of her legal options had been exhausted. Despite efforts from advocacy groups, the final decision was made, and her scheduled date was set. On May 10, 2002, Block faced the consequences of her actions at the Holman Correctional Facility near Atmore, Alabama. She declined to request a special last meal and chose not to make a final statement. Those present described her as calm and expressionless in her final moments. Block's case was historically significant. She was the first woman in Alabama to face this outcome since 1957. Additionally, she was the last person in the United States to undergo this specific legal consequence without being given an alternative method. Aileen Wuornos was born in 1956 in Rochester, Michigan. Her early years were filled with hardship. Her father, Leo Pittman, whom she never met, was incarcerated for offenses involving minors and later passed away while in custody. Her mother, Diane Wuornos, left Aileen and her brother when she was just 4 years old, placing them in the care of their maternal grandparents. Her upbringing was difficult. Her grandfather was known for his strict and often harsh discipline. By the time she was a young teenager, Aileen was exchanging favors for essentials like food and shelter. At 13, she became pregnant due to an incident involving an older acquaintance of the family. She gave birth to a child who was later placed for adoption. As she grew older, she struggled to make a living and frequently found herself in trouble with the law for various offenses, including theft and altercations. Between 1989 and 1990, a series of tragic incidents took place along Florida's highways, where she was found responsible for the loss of at least 6 men. She later stated that she acted only when she felt in danger. Her approach involved meeting men under certain agreements and later using force to defend herself, after which she would take their belongings and use their vehicles. The individuals involved were often found in remote locations, and one of them, Richard Mallory, had a history of offenses against women, which Wuornos pointed to as justification for her actions. She was taken into custody in 1991 after a nationwide search. During her legal proceedings, her defense maintained that she had only acted out of fear. But the jury did not accept this argument. She was given the most severe penalty possible at the time. In 1992, she was formally sentenced. She spent more than a decade in confinement before the sentence was carried out on October 9, 2002, at the Florida Department of Corrections facility in Stark, Florida. In her final hours, Wuornos declined a special meal and instead had a simple cup of coffee. Before her sentence was carried out, she made a final statement.
I'd just like to say I'm sailing with the Rock, and I'll be back like Independence Day with Jesus, June 6th. Like the movie, big mothership and all, I'll be back.
But what happens when you risk it all for some cash? This brings us to Frances. Frances Elaine Newton was born in 1965 in Harris County, Texas. By 1987, she was a 21-year-old mother of 2, married to Adrian Newton. The couple had 2 children, Alton, who was 7, and Farah, who was just 20 months old. Their marriage had difficulties, and Adrian was reportedly involved in illegal activities. Frances had a prior legal issue in December 1985 for signing someone else's name on a document without permission, for which she was given 3 years of supervised release. On April 7, 1987, something terrible happened in the Newton household. Adrian, Alton, and Farah were all found unresponsive in their apartment. Each had been harmed in the same way, with a .25 caliber pistol being used. Investigators later found out that Frances had recently purchased life insurance policies worth $50,000 each for Adrian and Farah, naming herself as the recipient. She admitted to signing Adrian's name on his policy without his knowledge, saying she didn't want him to find out about the expense. Shortly after the incident, Frances hid a paper bag containing the firearm at a relative's house. Authorities believed financial motivation was behind what happened, arguing that Frances had arranged the insurance policies shortly before the tragedy. However, Frances insisted she was innocent, saying that someone Adrian owed money to was responsible. In October 1988, Frances was found guilty based on indirect evidence. Many questioned whether she had been given a fair chance in court. The Austin American-Statesman reported that her legal representative had a poor track record, raising concerns about how well she was defended. Over the years, appeals were filed, and in 2004, Governor Rick Perry granted a 120-day delay so her case could be reviewed again. Her legal team argued that the evidence used against her was unreliable and that she was not responsible for what had happened. On September 14, 2005, Frances faced the final outcome of her sentence at the Huntsville unit in Texas. She became the third woman and the first black woman to receive this sentence in Texas since 1982. She chose not to give any final words and did not request a special last meal.